so we have gotten a lot of great information and tools to put into our toolkit. And so I think now is the time for us to have our question and answer. And so if you do not mind to put your question in the chat box, or you can unmute your mic in order to ask your question. But a question did come up for you, Kathy, as you were presenting. And so Vivian said, love to see the Indigenous focus of the Canada program, completely relevant in the US context as well, where there be Indigenous focus in the US.
I agree. It's completely relevant in the US as well. And certainly we want to do the, as I said, we're starting down the path of our Black American guide and programming around it. We want to do the same thing in partnership with others on tribal, and then also Latino, Asian American, and so forth. And it really is just capacity and funding needing to start somewhere. But again, back to it including everyone. We see this as a big priority as well for the US.
Thank you. Any other questions as of right now for our panelists? And you can type it in the chat box or unmute your mic. Well, while we're waiting, if there are no questions as of right now, so a question I will pose is, so we've talked about the successes. So were there any challenges that you all may have had through this process as you started your DE&I journey within your organization?
Well, certainly there were, and I'm sure each of us have some. I think maybe one I would just highlight is, again, on the front end around commitment, and in my view also institutionalizing this effort within the firm. You know, I think many of you know I've kind of had a personal passion for this, but I'm in that sweet transition to retirement, and one of my goals was that when I left the company or when I transitioned out of CEO, that this was embedded in the firm to the degree that it would continue on. And that's something that requires commitment from leadership, but communication, so that, and I do think one of our successes is I feel we've come a long way in ingraining these beliefs within, throughout the company. Not complete, not with perfection, but enough that I think we have momentum and enough catalyst for change that will continue on. So.
Thank you, Craig. Would any of the other panelists like to respond to that question?
I'll just add something that Craig had mentioned. This is Heather here, about the added challenge, or if you don't have your leadership on board. And several years ago, we didn't have leadership that was really admitting that this was something that they wanted to tackle, or that there was even an issue within our division. And so just having to overcome that hurdle and having someone above you being able to support you has been huge. But sitting around at the leadership table in a deputy position before I was in this role as administrator, and just having our leadership team even admit that that there were women challenges within our organization. It was like a blind eye. It was like, oh, we've come a long ways. We don't need to, support in these efforts. So, I think just recognizing that that's still a real thing, that people in leadership positions not wanting to peel apart and understand that there are even challenges within small pieces of your organization. So I'm glad Craig brought that up.
Thank you, Heather.
I would say there's challenges as well, both in finding capacity for training. I'd love to see a training dashboard about all the different training, cultural, racial, force sector, et cetera, that exists, and just how to access it, because we're constantly looking at providing training as well. And that's, I would just say that it's a capacity issue. And then it's sort of where I started today, was do think there's a big need for training. And it happens every day, every week. Last week I was on a call with a lot of people, and I was talking about the need for us just to track simple, gender, race, et cetera, in employment. And I was told I was too far ahead of the sector, and they sort of went on with language about gender invasion and being woke. And it's fine to track these things if they're professionals, but if they're not professional, it becomes really tiring. And so I just feel like we just need to have good training programs and good leadership decision making in place to assess these situations and learn how to deal with them effectively when you're confronted with folks that wish things wouldn't change. I think there's training for that as well in terms of leadership training.
Thank you. So we do have a few questions in the chat, and I know we are coming up on a break. So I will ask one more question, and then we'll save the other questions for hopefully for the duration of our sessions, whether it's tomorrow or Friday. And on particularly Friday, we will have time to answer some more questions that may not be answered during some of our sessions due to time. But I do want to say all of your questions are very important, and we want to make sure that we do respond accordingly. So the next question is for Kathy, but perhaps everyone. When you talk about putting the right people in the right places, i.e. firing, do you find that there is generational components to finding the right people for the position, or is DE&I something that you find generationally at this point?
Oh, what a great question. I would say we've hired a lot of young people under 30 of late in the last 5 years as part of our growth. And certainly it at least in the hires we've made, it seems like that's it's a priority for those hires, which is fantastic. So based on that small experience of who's applying to our organization for jobs, yes, that's I do find that the younger generation is more in tune with some of these social needs. But I do think that's a broad categorization. And of course, racism can be in any age group, but I find that sometimes I find I have the most difficult conversations with older people. Let's just say that. And I find I have the most inspiring conversations with younger people. And so, I guess that's again, my own world and my own experience. I can't speak for populations at large.
Thank you, Kathy. Any other panelists want to respond before we go to our break? All right, well, hearing none, we are going to first, I want to thank you panelists for sharing your success and showing us how you have led in your respective organization. And as a sector, it is important to lean on one another for best practices. So as we go to our break, think of yourself as a cohort of leaders wanting to make a positive change in your organization.